Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this very special episode of Data Exposed Live. Now, if you're just joining us or just getting started with us today, I wanted to give a brief recap on what we're doing today. So earlier today, we kicked off the... Oh, you can't see my screen. Earlier today, we kicked off the Around the Clock with Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. Now, this is a 24-hour cross time zone event where we're bringing in members of both the Azure Data Factory engineering team and the Azure SQL engineering team to talk to you and give sessions. And we even did a keynote earlier today around how these two services are really better together. And this has been a very low budget engineering run and managed event so that we can connect with you all, our community, our customers, our colleagues, and share the latest and greatest technology, as well as go deep dives, collect feedback from you all, and even do a hackathon. Now, if this all sounds interesting and you're not familiar with this, you can still register. So if you go to aka.ms/around-the-clock, you can register. We still have I think we have 8 or 9 sessions remaining that will be happening starting with this one and then continuing throughout the rest of the day. And we had 16 sessions earlier today, and these will all be hosted on a playlist, which we can share with you as well. Now, this session specifically is an awesome session because this is an Ask the Expert session, which basically means I've brought a ton of experts from both teams to come on and answer any questions that you happen to have live. So without further ado, I'm going to start by bringing up those experts that we have today, and I'll ask each expert to go ahead and introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. And I will go ahead and start with Abhishek. Abhishek, thanks for joining us today. Can you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'm Abhishek, and I work as a program manager in Azure Data Factory team. And I pretty much focus on security and CI/CD. So I'm happy to help answer all the questions around Data Factory, CI/CD, external activities, which is integration with Databricks, and so on.
Awesome. Thanks, Abhishek. Next, I'm going to bring on Linda. Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Glad to join this session to talk to you all. This is Linda Wang. I'm the program manager from Azure Data Factory team as well. I mainly focus on all the connectors and copy data, etc. So greetings from China.
Awesome. Great to have you. And next, we're going to bring up Sandy. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Winarko. I'm the lead PM in Azure Data Governance and Azure Data Factory. I lead the effort in modernizing SQL Server Integration Services, or SSIS, both on-premises and also in the cloud as part of ADF.
Awesome. And next we have Yi.
Hello, everyone. So this is Yi. I'm also the program manager working for Azure Data Factory team. So I'm more focused on the ingest big data into a data lake, data warehouse, all this kind of a best practice as well as the pattern. Yeah. Feel free to let me know if you have any question. I'm glad to help. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Yi. And last but not least, we have Alain. Hi, Alain. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Anna. Thanks so much. And welcome for joining us. I'm a PM on the Azure SQL Data team, and I look after some of our monitoring tools and then some of the replication technologies we deploy. And I also sort of look after some of the billing artifacts for Azure SQL in Azure.
Awesome. Wonderful. So we have some really great experts here on Azure Data Factory as well as Azure SQL. So one thing I forgot to mention is how you're going to get your questions to us. So we are streaming on Learn TV, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. So if you want to post your questions anywhere that you're streaming from, that will work fine. If you want to ask through Learn TV, I posted a link at the bottom of this page. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get right into it. I have this question coming in, and it is, I need to connect to my SAP data sources. Which SAP data sources are supported? Awesome. Thanks, Linda.
I will take this one. So Azure Data Factory has really a breadth of connectivity to help you reach your any data stores. And for SAP specifically, we actually have several SAP-related connectors, including the SAP HANA, which can connect to the database. And we also have the SAP Open Hub, can reach the SAP BW. Also, for ECC or other applications running on SAP, we have the ECC connector and also the SAP Table connector. Last but not most, we also have the cloud C4C, Cloud for Customer. And for different scenarios, for different applications or database, data warehouse you want to connect, you can really choose from this. And on our actually documentation, we have a detailed white paper to talk about how to choose among this available connectors based on your different needs. And that white paper also have the double click and drill downs on how those connector works, the supported capabilities, the architecture, and the best practice, and all etc. So suggest you to assess your workload and also the needs on the SAP connectivity and data loading patterns, then refer to our documentation, especially that white paper, to learn more about the capability and choose from that.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda. And, there are over, I think, 90 connectors for Azure Data Factory. So there really, are a lot of different places you can connect from here. Now, this next question comes from Eclipsing Sun. They ask, I am not sure what Azure Data Factory is. Can you explain what Azure Data Factory is in a nutshell? So any takers on that one? Great.
Sure, I can have a go. Azure Data Factory is a cloud-managed ETL service. So think of it as any requirement that you have to do with ETL, which is more of a data engineering, I would say, a word used quite often within that. But ETL is basically extract, transform, and load, which is basically a data engineering process. And as a data engineer, you typically would want to connect to different data sources, extract them, load them into a landing area before you actually cleanse them, make it appropriate so that you can use them in your analytics and reporting. And then, so this whole process is known as ETL. And what ADF does is ADF makes this whole ETL experience more cloud native by making it as a PaaS offering on Azure. So Azure is the cloud. And of course, ADF is the PaaS service on the cloud, which helps you build these beautiful data engineering pipelines for the ETL purpose, which is extract, transform, and load. So in a nutshell, that is what ADF as a service is.
Awesome. Thanks, Abhishek. This next question, we're going to just keep rolling, comes from Learn TV. This user says, what are the different types of integration runtimes that ADF supports? Awesome. Yi? Oh, sorry. I think I muted you. Go ahead.
Sure. So let me take this one. So basically, ADF, Azure Data Factory, supports different type of Azure integration runtime, or solid integration runtime based on different environment. So I think the most intuitive one for the customer to use is we call Azure integration runtime, which means when you're doing no matter ingest data or data analysis, some ETL, and make your kind of transformation logic running on a real VM or VM pool. All this kind of pool is dynamically, automatically provisioned by Azure Data Factory on Azure. So for customer, you do not need to understand or manage all this kind of infrastructure for you. So Azure Data Factory can help you to do everything. So this is we call Azure integration runtime. You only need to give us some setting like, hey, how many CPU, memory, this kind of thing you need, and we're gonna everything gonna done for you. So this is one. But based on that, we also see some other requirement in some other environments. Say, hey, I want to load data from the on-premise some store, my file share, my on-premise SQL, where all the kind of connection or all the kind of store was sitting behind my enterprise firewall. So given that, there's no kind of direct connect between my enterprise network with Azure. So given that, we have provided another type of integration runtime called self-host integration runtime, which you can download a kind of agent and install in your, the on-premise store within your enterprise firewall. And this guy is gonna help to pull your data from your on-prem store and push to the Azure. So it's very convenient and easy for you to dealing with that kind of scenario using this type of integration runtime. And based on these two, the third one is we also see many special acts say, hey, so we are now in moving every data in Azure, and we want to do all the kind of ETL data transformation on Azure, but we want our environment is living in a very secure environment, say everything in a virtual network or something like this. So given that, so the customer also do not want to manage all the infra, just let Azure Data Factory to provision automatically all the kind of runtime into my VNet, something like this. So given that, we also provide something called Azure Integration Runtime in VNet. We call VNet Integration Runtime. So the user experience is very similar as what I called the first one, Azure Integration Runtime, but everything going to be connected to your VNet environment. It's a more secure way for you to using any infra behind Azure Data Factory. And the last type of the integration runtime is we call the SSIS integration runtime. This is more useful for the fourth scenario when you try to lift and shift your existing SSIS package from on-prem to the Azure. So using that SSIS integration runtime, you can running or deploy all of your SSIS package and make it running on cloud. So yeah, that's the answer. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Yi. Yeah, it seems like there are quite a few options, but it was clear, there are different use cases that might lead you to picking one over the other. All right, so this next question comes from Jason. I think Jason was actually on our Ask the Expert about 12 hours ago. So kudos to you, Jason, for sticking it out and for a very long day. Jason says, can we connect and fetch data from Salesforce from ADF and vice versa? We'll pass that to Linda. Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, absolutely. Azure Data Factory does support the Salesforce connector, both as source and sink. So you can read data from Salesforce and write data, for example, to Azure Storage or Azure SQL database. And also you can do the reverse direction as well. So this is definitely a supported scenario. And also we support many other SaaS applications beyond Salesforce, like Dynamics or etc. Hope that helps to fulfill your need.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda. Now, this next question also comes from Jason. Alain, I think this might be a good question for you. Jason says, do we have any good tools for converting an on-prem database that is using cross-database queries to an elastic pool?
It is a good question. So, unfortunately, today there's nothing like easy out of the box that's going to do that for you. But I think sort of with elastic pools, we don't allow the restoring of native databases. But if cross-database queries is one of the sort of major requirements you have, my recommendation would always be to customers to look at managed instance, because none of the single database deployments natively support cross-database queries. You can use things like elastic jobs and things like that, but really managed instance was built for those scenarios. And in that case, bringing a backup of your database becomes a much easier conversation than it would be in elastic pools.
Awesome. Thanks, Alain. This next question, I think this is going to be a great question for Sandy, but please correct me if I'm wrong. This question says, my company is migrating to Azure SQL VM. How do I know Azure Data Factory if it's good for my SSIS workloads? Sandy, is that something you can help with?
Yeah. Well, our recommendation is actually when you migrate your SSIS package from running on-prem to the cloud, we actually recommend running it on a platform as a service within SSIS integration runtime in Azure Data Factory. But if you're migrating your SQL server from on-prem to a SQL VM in Azure, that SSIS IR integration runtime in ADF can still reach the data in your SQL VM in Azure. So, like I said, the best way to run SSIS packages in the cloud in a fully compatible, fully managed platform is using the SSIS integration runtime in Azure Data Factory, just like what Ye was mentioning before.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy. This next question is coming from Tomar on Learn TV. He says, what is the difference between the polybase and copy command in copy activity, and which one is faster to load data into Azure Synapse? This is a fairly specific question. Okay, Linda's going to take it.
So polybase and copy command are two kind of different syntax to load data into Synapse. And the polybase is the previous version, and copy command is newly introduced in GA, I think, later last year. And polybase can load data from into Synapse, and in addition, it can also do some analysis, the query against the external tables, while copy command is more specific and targeted to load data into the Synapse. And regarding the performance, copy command, besides the performance, copy command can support more richer text parser as a feature add. And also it implies different permissions required to load it, to write data into Synapse. For example, to use the polybase, you will need the DB control role, but to use the copy command, only the write permission is needed. So there are some capability difference between these two. For the performance, this is more Synapse specific area, but what I learned is copy command will be on par or faster than the polybase, and that copy command capability is still evolving as well. So ADF support both mechanisms when you configure copy activity and target Synapse as the destination.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda. Hopefully that helped, Tomar. This next question is also coming from Learn TV from Miral. They say, what is the best practice or design to recover Data Factory in a different Azure region in a case that the primary region is going down? Abhishek?
Sure. I'll take a go at it. So the good practice would be, first of all, ADF is a PaaS service. So we do make sure that there is SLAs around the PaaS service, and so we offer that. But we do understand that in terms of there can be certain components in Data Factory which can go down. For example, integration runtime, which can be customer owned as well, especially in case of self-hosted integration runtime. Or there can be unforeseen outage in any of the Azure data center as well, which can probably hurt the SLAs there. So I think a good practice as of now is to kind of configure Git in your Data Factory instances, and how it helps is basically when you use Git, Azure DevOps or GitHub integration in Data Factory, is you get all the code artifacts, all the business logic that you're kind of writing in terms of pipelines are stored with you apart from the service itself. So let's say if you have to do a manual failover in this case, because that's what is available today on the table. So if we have to do a manual failover, it's going to be very easy for you to kind of deploy an ARM template, which is already captured as part of the Git integration that you have done, and then deploy that into any new environment. So you can manually set up this whole redundancy in your whole solution, because you already have the latest code, latest and the greatest code that you have done, which you have deployed in, let's say, a factory in region A. And if region A goes down, you still continue to have the code with you in Azure DevOps or GitHub. And so all you need to do is trigger a deployment process in a new region. And that can be automated as well. If you're using Azure DevOps automation, or if you're using GitHub Actions, these operations can be automated as well in case if a particular region goes down. So I think in a nutshell, that's probably a good practice to make sure you can manually recover your Data Factory and pipelines in least amount of time.
Awesome. Thanks, Abhishek. I think that's a really important question. So I'm glad Mural asked it. This next question also comes from Learn TV from Sam Path. It says, sometimes it takes more time to load a small CSV file from blob storage to Azure SQL DB, even with a simple transformation. Example, source, derive, transformation, sync. What could be a possible reason for that? Any ideas? This might be something we want to take offline.
Yeah, I can talk about it. Maybe this is one of the common patterns when we talk to customers. We do get to understand, especially when you're using components like data flows in Data Factory. There is a concept of kind of a cold start, which basically means there can be a latency in case if your clusters are not available, clusters kind of tied to the integration runtime. There are properties like TTL and stuff which can help you in terms of keeping cluster warm. But in many times what happens, first job of the day that you runs with a cold start problem, which even though it might be doing a transformation of few rows, but there might be a good amount of time, 2 minutes or so, to just kind of warm up the cluster, get it into a ready state. And that's a typical thing that we see. And I think that's by design for now. I think there are improvements that's work in progress, which will help reduce that cold start as well moving forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Abhishek. This next question is a little bit slightly off topic of Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory, but I am going to bring it up because I think Alain will be able to help us with it. This question comes from Kodashan. Is it safe to say that Azure Synapse is comparable to the product AWS Redshift? Alain, is that something you have insights on?
I mean, that's a kind of like a loaded question, but I think it's Synapse is so much more than Redshift, right? Like if you look at what Synapse is kind of just kind of what Synapse offers out of the box to customers with things like the Synapse link for Cosmos and all of that, whereas Redshift is really a data warehouse, right? And I think Synapse has kind of evolved away from just being a data warehouse that competes in that space to so much more of a product. I'm definitely not the expert on it, but I mean, that's my take on it for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Alain. This next question comes from Jason, and there's kind of a follow-up here. Jason says, do we have a tool for database source control that's supported in SSMS or Azure Data Studio, something like Redgate? What I'm looking for is whenever I make any change to the Azure SQL database structure, I need to add the script in Git or something for versioning. Any takers? No. Okay. Well, I can comment on that just briefly. We do have some different tools available to help with things that I think you're referring to. One thing I would consider looking at is SQL Database Project, and in addition to that, you might consider exploring some open source tools called, for example, DBUp. Those are some things that can help you in doing things like what I think you're trying to do, and I can find some references for you as well for that. Okay, let's see what else we got. Kodashan said, thank you for answering the questions. I appreciate the guidance. Let's see. Let's see if we have some other questions. Looks like I have one. Oh, I think maybe this is a good one. It says, can you share whether there are any guides on tuning ADF data flows? Anyone want to take that one?
Sure. There is a tuning guide, which is part of our Azure docs. So if you just search by data flow, data factory, perf tuning, you will probably land to that. It's part of our documentation. And so it kind of highlights all the different considerations that you need to make while designing your data flow pipelines, starting from different source type, different partitioning, logic, different integration runtime stuff. And I think we should just post the link for that doc here. So I'll do that right away.
Awesome. Yep, we can get that posted. Okay, this next question comes from Mary on Learn TV. She says, can you export one pipeline in ADF, then import that to another ADF instance, not the entire ARM template, and how?
Sure, I'll take a go at it again. So you can export a pipe. You can there's a functionality in ADF where you can save pipeline as a template. What it does is it basically templatizes that particular pipeline and all the dependencies. Not really all, I would say. Things which it doesn't templatize or package in that template is the link service. ADF has different components like pipelines, which basically contains different activities and your business logic in it. But there is a artifact, which is the link service, which basically is kind of connections to different data stores. And from security perspective, that's not a safe thing to import and export security credentials while you are importing and exporting packages. So what we let you do is you can manually export a safe pipeline as a template and export that as a zip file. Basically, it will give you a zip file with all the JSON artifacts in it, except for the link services that we mentioned, because it contains security credentials. And then you can import this whole zip file as a template. So if you go into Data Factory, there's a template gallery. You can import templates. So you can export and import templates there as well. So that's probably one of the ways how you can think of doing it. There are different ways or workarounds as well. For example, if you're using Git, think of it that Git will also clone different pipelines. But the problem with the Git approach is it clones everything. So the moment you map a Git to another factory, you can actually access all the pipelines. So I'm not sure if you want to do that, but there is that way as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Abhishek. Okay, we have just a few more minutes left. I do have a question from YouTube. Let me see if I can put it up. Says, loading Parquet to Synapse is faster using Azure Data Factory. Does it work the same way on Azure SQL DB as well as for all the formats such as CSV, binary, and Parquet? Any recommendations? Awesome. Thank you, Linda.
So loading to Synapse is related to the previous question. Actually, underneath, ADF can invoke either the polybase or copy command, which is the kind of distributed manner for Synapse to really pull data from the storage. And that is the magic happened underneath for loading into Synapse. For loading into Azure SQL database, the behaviors is a bit different. So what happens is ADF, the runtime, either is the managed Azure integration runtime or the self-hosted integration runtime, will parse the files and write to the Azure SQL database. There are some tuning tips as well, but this is like ADF will be responsible for read data and write to the database. And ADF does support a rich set of the formats, like the Parquet, CSV, ORC, even Excel, JSON, XML, or etc. Binary doesn't really applies here, as the binary is more for do not parse the file but load the files as this. So we also have a session to talk about the performance tuning for different different data ingesting scenarios later of the day. Anna, seems you are muted.
Thank you. Happens to the best of us. So what I was saying is, since we just have a few minutes left, I just wanted to put a few references up on the screen. You'll see one here, and it should be posted as well from wherever you're streaming from. This is the tuning guide that was mentioned several times. We're also going to post a link to a blog about assessing, testing, and migrating SSIS packages with Azure SQL enabled services, I'm thinking. But as we close out, I want to thank all of our experts for joining us today. And for our viewers, I want to encourage you to join us for the rest of the event. All of the experts you see here are going to be having sessions in the coming hours or already have, but there are some exciting sessions. Abhishek's going to be talking about a hackathon, which I think you all will really enjoy. And there's lots more ways to engage. So please, from here, hop over to Teams, and we'll be running the rest of the event on our Teams channel. Thank you so much to our wonderful experts. And, you know, as we close this out, we hope to see you on Teams, and we hope you have a great rest of the event. Thank you, and see you next time on Data Exposed.